You ever watch a piece of content and go, this affected me more than I thought it would?
Will I watch a movie or show solely because someone told me it had gay representation in it? Yes. Will I love that show unconditionally because it has gay representation in it? No. I have high standards. I want a plotline that does not solely revolve around homophobia. I want romance that is real and not just because they're the only two gay characters in the show. I want to be wooed. I want them to work for it. I want there to be passion. I want there to be excitement. I would also like for them to have swords.
Well, hey, howdy, y'all. This one's for you. Alright, you all read the title, you know what we're here for, let's not beat around the bush. Yes, we all want this, and it's high time we get one. Disney has been making baby steps towards representation for years now. The two most blatant examples come from Beauty and the Beast 2017 and Pixar's Onward, which I do have slight issue with, but I'll cover those in a minute. This whole idea just kinda came to me when I was driving one night, and it just stuck with me how easy it would be. The idea is not new at all, just taking a pre-existing concept and flipping one of the main characters' genders makes sense in a vacuum. But to me, it made more sense to find a story that hadn't been told before with two characters of the same gender and then turning that into a romance, which when it came to female-female pairings, there was no shortage. But for the male-male ones, that was pretty sparse. The only one I could think of off the top of my head, and incidentally is the one we're talking about today, is The Prince and the Pauper. The Prince and the Pauper is a strange one to make into a gay Disney love story because, well, it's about two men who look identical to each other trading lives for a day to see how the other fits. How does one make that into a love story? Much less a compelling one without it coming off as narcissistic on the part of the characters in the relationship, since at the end of the day, they're fucking their twin. Simple. Make the pauper not identical to the prince, and instead make him the prince's steward that has been his best friend since childhood. The reason for this is due to the fact that we need a reason for these two to know each other and be an already established friendship before the story starts, and having the typical age up by way of music number song in most modern Disney movies, see Moana, Frozen, and Tarzan for examples, is an easy way to establish the friendship and make it a lot easier to accept in the eyes of the viewer. This sidesteps the issue that most conservatives will have that the relationship is about as shallow as Flynn and Rapunzel or Anne and Kristoff, despite the fact that these pairs have only just met and these two have been besties since fucking childhood. The relationship doesn't have to establish any running bits for them or even make with the traditional awkward stammering that people think has to happen when you have any romantic feelings for a person, since the number is supposed to cover the getting to know you portion of their lives and thus showing how the little things that make a relationship matter when it's started is basically pointless since by the time the story starts, they're 18. One thing before I address the walking pride parade and the Cyclops is that I need to explain why I think one of them being the other steward is a good thing and not a problematic power dynamic thing, and that's the way they treat each other. They're best friends. The prince, who I'm going to name Wesley, treats him like a person, not a steward. He never asks for anything that isn't outside the realm of the normal shit, like getting him a drink while he's in the middle of a ceremony or a long meeting, and he does things for Simon. The steward's name is Simon, by the way. So Wesley does things with Simon, or for Simon, like help him clean and just hang out, and even asks him to escort him to town as some sort of guard, when in reality they just chill and be bro friends together, and just peruse the shops in the streets, just stuff like that. Like a normal friendship and eventual relationship would be. Like, that's the setup I kind of want for this. Alright, now we've set up the two boyfriends, but how do we get them together when they're already so close and yet they haven't pulled the trigger? Well, the simple fact is that it's occurred to both of them, they just haven't done it yet. And the simple reason for that is because there's a festival coming out that they want to ask the other one out at during the fireworks. You know, cute shit like that. This is all done in the first act, by the way, so that the rest of the movie can deal with the relationship moving forward and try to develop it more and maybe test it in a way or two that I'll get to you later. However, we do have a bump in the road to smooth out. First, let's address the lesbian Cyclops in the room. Something that I have stood rigidly against is having LGBTQ characters as monsters. Now, this is blunted by the fact that Onward is kind of being made up entirely of fantasy creatures, but the fact that people are blowing up in a positive way at this character being a monster and again being a side character is just not something I want to cheer. I want to cheer a main character, or 2 or 20, being open about it. But we're not here for Onward. It's an alright movie and that character is fine for what she is. She is, after all, a side character and I can't get mad at a bit character for that. Hell, that line about her girlfriend was an ad-lib, so it wasn't even intentional. The problems come in with characters like LeFou. LeFou is not a good way to do a gay character. He's all subtext and nothing is stated outright except for this one shot near the end and it's not going to be tolerated. This pissant also highlights a problem I want to sidestep for the first film and the lesbian one I would like to make someday as well. That being the issue of coding. Coding, for those of you who don't know, is applying gender, sexuality, racial, or even religious connotations to characters that are otherwise removed from those groups. A quick example is this scene from Hercules. Herc is Greek, and they have their own religion and their own way of praying, even back then. But we in the West associate prayer with getting on our knees. This is Catholic coding, or shorthand depending on who you ask, but it works both ways. However, for today's discussion, we're going to look at feminine or gay-coded characters. The biggest example I can think of that people will understand is the 90s Disney villains. Jafar, Scar, and even King Candy are all really rather effeminate characters, with mannerisms or even just body language that reads as feminine to people. This is of course to make them seem more villainous, seeing as the heroes are typically masculine-coded characters that move the way you'd assume masculine men to move and behave, and this makes it much easier to get people to side with these kind of characters. Now, this isn't to say that feminine-coded male characters are inherently bad, but for the first outing I'd like to avoid this. The reason for this is that there's a persistent and rather staggering amount of straight people who assume that if there are two people of the same sex dating, there must be a feminine one and a masculine one, whether it be male-male or female-female, or any other kind of combination of sexualities and gender identities you can think of. People just assume that if you're a mask guy, you must want a femboy, and that if you're a lipstick lesbian, you must want a butch woman, and that is just not true at all. I bring all this up because if this ever sees the light of day, the two leads must be masked. They can have feminine interests or hobbies or like sewing or flowers or decorating or what have you. But here's the kicker. Having feminine interests doesn't make one feminine. This also applies to two femme women. They can like sword fighting and lifting and all that shit and still like dresses and being feminine. See also Ted Mosby from How I Met Your Mother and Cassandra from the Tangled series. I need to drill this home. In order to avoid that bullshit argument that there is clearly a mask and a femme character in this relationship, the simplest way to do this is to make them both mask and give them both interests that are considered to be both mask and femme. Like one of them likes sword fighting and sews, and one likes to do parkour and likes gardening. I know this is pendulum swinging in the opposite direction pretty hard, but work with me here, I'm thinking of this shit on the fly. Alright, now that we have all that conservative shit out of the way, let's move on to the story. There's a second thing I neglected to mention here, and that's an antagonist. The best villain of the last decade of Disney was Mother Gothel, and that's simply down to how personal of a conflict she was to Rapunzel. She gaslit, belittled, and overall treated her like hell for her entire life, only to give her the time of day when it suited her. Now, that was an abusive bitch who was afraid of death, but we can't have this antagonist be that, namely homophobic. We don't want the villain to be homophobic, because that's just been done to death, and not to mention, it's just not suited for a Disney movie. No, I want a generic conflict done in a more fun way. Let's do the get rid of the siblings so I can be the ruler of the land thing, because while that's been done to death as well, it's at least able to be played with in different ways. For instance, the antagonist would be the sister who is about a year younger than the prince, and she wants to be queen and is shunned to the side because of the simple fact the prince is being groomed to take the throne, whereas she was left with her books and things of that nature. Now, while that sounds good in theory, and the prince would normally be a dickhead, but the difference is that the prince and the steward are the main characters, best friends and even boyfriends later, and have friends in town and are genuinely charming while in the kingdom. But the princess is only left with her handmaid, who she doesn't know that well and is very stoic. On top of that, her parents leave her in the library because they think it's better than her possibly getting into trouble, and it just makes her resent her brother and his relationship. The only person she can even remotely talk to is a guard who he himself is just a dick to the prince because of how carefree he can be. So, you guys remember that festival I told you about a while ago where the two ask each other out? Well, we're back to that. I want this thing to last a few days, and they ask each other out on like day one of it. So it's after that first day, and the sister hears about this the next morning at breakfast. She just loses her damn mind and pays off her guard friend to drug her brother and his boyfriend so they'll pass out and they can get carted away far from the kingdom. This is where Act 2 begins. The boys wake up on a cart full of hay and stuff like that about a 2-day walk from home. And remember when I said that people hadn't really seen the prince outside the main town connected to the kingdom? Well, this is why. It allows for the story's namesake to make sense. I might not have mentioned this, but they were wearing street clothes at the festival. Well, there could be a pin or a little insignia that indicates a royal title that one of them could wear to try and get help from people they meet. This could lead way to a misunderstanding or even a misuse of Wesley's trust if Simon isn't careful. For instance, they could wander into a tavern and Simon could be chatting up some guy for supplies or trying to haggle with the bartender using the pendant or to try to get something out of them. Because they've been doing this the whole time but usually ask each other, and here he just took it upon himself to do it, and that gets old Wesley mad. And honestly, I could see why. I mean, of course I could, I fucking wrote this. It would make him feel used by the one person he thought he could trust and could be one of, if not the first real fights they have. But here's the kicker, it won't end the relationship, because fights are common, and in this case, it was a simple oversight rather than genuine malice. It also won't be a breakup before the final act of the climax thing, because I hate that trope, but I want like a bit of friction between them. Also, I have nowhere else to put this, but they have a little blue husky puppy that has like bat wings, and her name is Murphy Ann, because I don't know why. My sister came up with the name, and I just love the idea of a blue husky with wings just flying around them. It likes to sit on their heads like an Eevee from Let's Go Eevee. I don't know why I'm telling you this other than I commissioned the artwork and I want to put it in this video and it's fucking cute. Anyway, back to the script. I want this to be an aspect, but I also don't want it to dominate the movie. I want people to come back and see this as the well-intentioned but flawed fuck-up that it is, while also still seeing that they've moved forward since that's how people work. Any healthy relationship, be they romantic or platonic or familiar, doesn't need to end because you have one fight that ultimately comes down to an oversight. Some people see an argument in a relationship and think that it's weaker because of it, which I think shows how weak a relationship is if you're happy all the time, because if you haven't tested the boundaries of your dynamic, you won't know how to handle the tough things when they come your way. When I said this would be their first real fight, I meant on something that would actually matter. Remember, these two have lived a pretty easy life in the palace, and since Simon is basically fucking the prince, he had a pretty cushy gig by having a nicer room, an actual bed, plenty of downtime for hobbies, and all that stuff. So while they had petty or simple day-to-day arguments, it wasn't something like this. So the relationship has been tested because, of course it has in the past, that's how humans work. But in this one fight, it shows how they can be pushed and how they can react to things. And here's the interesting thing. I want them to make up after the fight and say the phrase, "I love you" to each other. If Rapunzel and Flynn or even fucking Ariel and Eric can say it less than a week in, then I think two people who have been friends for their entire lives saying it 3 days into the relationship would be perfectly acceptable since it's not too far from the typical Disney formula. As for the climax, it could boil down to the sister taking over the role the prince has fulfilled, and when she sees he's back, she keeps him and Simon away from getting back to the king and queen, and has them either thrown into prison or straight up tries to stop them to get what she wants. I think a sword fight where she's able to take both of them on would be an interesting new kind of climax for Disney. We've had a lot of interesting climax over the last 20 years with this company, but a straight up sword fight with a lifetime expert, his decent at best boyfriend who can parkour for some over the head shots, versus a woman who has studied the same subject for years and has been training in it due to her isolation would be extremely fun. I don't want to talk her off the ledge from being a monster. I want her to be talked out of getting rid of them again and is still punished. I honest to God don't think her damage is that she wants to be a malevolent force. She just wanted the respect and attention she was routinely not given, and when she got it, she wanted to keep it by any means. This means she understands what she did wrong, but won't be let off the hook for it. While yes, she didn't kill anyone, banishing, staging a coup, and attempted maiming by sword fight is more than enough for a few years in jail or a convent or something like that, I don't know. I don't want the punishment to be permanent, just make a statement that she learned something. Maybe one day she can get a spouse of her own and rule that kingdom as an equal, or be her brother's advisor whenever she serves her time, or be captain of the royal guard. Just something that gives her power and respect for the skill and knowledge she has so that this won't happen again. Again, she fucked up, but it can be moved past when she served her time. One thing that villains in animation have been doing a lot is that they do something horrible, downright repugnant, and then saying that they're sad or that they're misunderstood or whatever, and then getting no punishment. And everyone showers them with hugs and kisses and they get to go back to their lives like nothing happened. I hate this. Now, forgiving someone who has wronged you personally is a fine lesson to teach to children, which is why her biggest crime is trying to win a sword fight with her equal and a lesser skilled foe, which is what caused her to lose. Again, the banishment and the coup are bad, but the king and queen were still in charge, so forgiveness still works here because it doesn't completely spit on the concept. She still gets punished, and it will last some time, so now the problem of villains getting forgiveness without atonement goes away. Can you tell I put a lot of thought into this idea? Because I really don't want this to be a flop. I really hope you all enjoyed this movie pitch, I guess? I don't know what you'd call this. I tried my best to address past issues or even try to sidestep tropes from other LGBT media for this kind of story because one trope I hate is femme must be with mask and vice versa, because I, as a mask guy who likes other mask guys, exist. I wish I could see more of that. And I know how two femme guys can like each other. Hell, I myself had a lesbian boss who herself was pretty butch, and her wife was even more butch than she was. I want to make this as clear as I can. If this could ever be made, I would hope they would stick to these temples. They must be the same presentation, again, the whole mask thing. They must get together before the story ends, like Act 1 or Act 2. And 3, they cannot have the villain be homophobic, because that just creates another problem that tells people that homophobes are the only thing that gay people have to deal with, and not some other character flaw or simply just dealing with some stupid petty shit. If you guys have any other thoughts, concerns, or questions, ask me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. Other than that, I hope you like this. And as always, my name is Chris. I hope you have a fractastic day, and I want my Gay Baby Prince movie. Please, God, let it happen. I want this so bad.